Well, after a record-breaking run, US markets appear to be entering corrective mode. In overnight trading, we saw pressure across the board. The S&P 500 and Dow Jones Industrial Average both finishing deeply in the red. We also saw pressure on the NASDAQ, but a couple of spectacular results there and some good gains managed to keep the NASDAQ flat for the session. And it was results particularly from Microsoft and Meta that helped hold up the NASDAQ despite that broad selling pressure across share markets through Europe and into the US session. And you can see what a difference in behavior we saw in the NASDAQ overnight. We've got that beautiful steady uptrend, something that investors often rely on as well as traders. And yet on the right-hand side there, you can see last night's action. Now, this is a daily candle chart, so each candle represents one day's trading. And you can see that last night is a big red candle. The daily range was much larger than we'd seen for the last few weeks. And that change in direction could be suggesting, at least in the short term, a change in trend for the NASDAQ. That big red engulfing candle in itself is a red flag, if I can use that term, to traders, and we could see further profit taking coming in. However, I've got to say the picture is slightly complicated by the fact that it was also end of month. And in a month where we've seen good gains, the temptation, particularly for those institutional fund managers who are measured on a monthly basis, is to lock in some of the gains they have made over a month, like July, where the market had a nice steady uptrend. So we'll have to see how it pans out over the next couple of trading sessions. But on the face of it, it does look like we've got a signal we might be looking at, in the least, a short-term corrective move in the markets. And the reasons for that were tied to the macro once again. At 2 p.m. East Coast time today, the introduction of US tariffs on a number of countries will come into force. And we've recently heard news in the last hour or so that President Trump has signed orders imposing new tariffs on a number of nations. None of them appear to be particularly significant trading partners apart from Canada, where the general tariff has been lifted to 35%. And that could have a big impact in trading tonight in the US, particularly on industries like the auto manufacturing industry, where we know there's a lot of cross-border commerce in the manufacturing chain. So that could have an impact in trading. It's also likely to have an impact on analysts' expectations for the growth or otherwise of the US economy. So these tariffs are important. It's pretty clear that markets no longer see them as a threat to the global trade system, but rather a negotiating tool that might add some inflationary pressures. And the evidence for that is in the market action. Last night, the US dollar strengthened again, and it appears it's resumed its safe haven status and is holding up well. And you can see on this chart of dollar yen, just how dramatic the lift has been, because the dollar yen pair had stalled around that 148 mark a number of times. Last night it broke through and breached a 150, and that dollar strength is an indication, one, of rising fear in the market, and two, that the dollar has resumed its status as a safe haven. And the fact that this is due to rising fear is evidenced by the VIX also rising last night, taking a bit of a jump, almost 2% jump. And that rising fear suggests that we might be in for a rough few trading sessions early next week and even tonight. Turning to the individual results, we saw some very strong performances in the market from Microsoft and Meta. Now, you might recall we touched on these yesterday morning. They had reported after market yesterday morning, and the reactions we'd seen in after market trading carried through into the full session overnight, with Meta up 11%, matching its gains in the aftermarket. Microsoft did move up during the day trading session, and at one stage breached the $4 trillion mark, only the second company ever to do so. However, after making gains of around 8% in line with its aftermarket performance yesterday morning, it then gave up about half of those gains to finish the session still up 4%, but below the 4 trillion mark. A very important move. Another interesting move in overnight trading was eBay. It was up very strongly, up 18%. And the talk around that gain was that eBay was considered tariff resilient, that it's a business that will benefit from the tariff barriers being erected because it's largely a domestic business. So it also gave a strong quarterly report suggesting that it has already benefited, and investors seem to put two and two together when it came to eBay to lift it, and that sort of momentum likely to continue at some stage. Apple have announced their quarterly earnings report. They've beaten expectations and are trading up 2% in the post-market. Apple did very well in iPhones and also in China, increasing sales there. Its wearables division still in trouble and spiralling downward, but the good gains in Mac products also meant that overall we saw a strong lift in revenue at Apple, and profits up almost 10% for the quarter. Another strong performance and likely to see some further support. Perhaps more disappointing, Amazon, it's down 7% in aftermarket trading. Not only did it report under analyst expectations, but it's lowered forecasts for income for the next few quarters, and that, of course, weighs on a share price. Coinbase, the recent listing, also has missed sales, and it's underestimates by about 9%. And of course, that means that we're likely to see share price pressure. Now, you can see here the Coinbase chart. Coinbase has been enjoying very popular support as cryptocurrencies have risen. Its share price has echoed those gains. But you can see here in the highlighted box here what's happening in the aftermarket trading, with the stock down 9% and likely to have a very rough session once US trading resumes tonight. The Australian market, we're expecting to open down by about 0.75%. The futures indicate a 60-point plus fall at the open. We're also seeing likely pressure on the Nikkei futures there, down 1%. So it does look like we'll have a fairly rough trading session here in the Asia Pacific region today. We'll be trading as that tariff deadline hits, and so very likely to see first blush reactions here in the Asia Pacific region. We'll be watching the miners very closely today. They came under significant pressure in trading yesterday, with most of the global miners down 1% to 2%, and some of the smallers hit even harder. Now, overnight, we've seen a further decline in the iron ore price. So it does seem we'll see further pressure on those global players, with iron ore slipping below $100 a tonne. We could see a continuation of that pressure. And given their significance to the index, that probably makes for another reason to be cautious in trading today. On a brighter note, to finish up with, ResMed has announced its results this morning. It's beat forecasts and its profits are up 37%. A very clear recovery after some real concerns about competition in its sector. It appears that it's reasserted its dominance, and a profitability gain like that should see further support for ResMed shares in trading here in Australia and in the US, as it is a dual listed company.